Welcome to Aspen Ignites, Conversations to Build a Better World, a series from the Aspen Institute that brings together thoughtful people with diverse backgrounds and points of view. The Aspen Institute's Energy and Environment Program Executive Director Greg Gershuny and Associate Director Nikki DeVignes talk about ways to move the needle on climate change with Alison Takemura, staff writer for Canary Media. She asked whether they've seen momentum towards climate solutions.
We're seeing a lot of impacts from climate change already, things that felt like they might be far off, but are happening now, like heat waves and extreme weather. And so the urgency to transition to clean energy is becoming more and more urgent. And so what we focus on at the Aspen Institute is bringing people together. All the different folks who need to be at the table to make this transition happen is how we organize our work, whether it's companies that are building clean energy, solar panels or wind turbines, the companies that are buying that energy, academics who are doing the research, policymakers, young people. We bring them all together to build collaboration. And so some of the things that we're working on specifically is, if the clean energy transition is a road, we're trying to flatten out some of the speed bumps to make sure it happens as smoothly and efficiently as possible. And so we've done some work on how we permit energy infrastructure to make sure that we're protecting the environment, but building the things we need to build as quickly as we can. We are working on critical minerals, everything from our phones to wind turbines to our electric vehicles have critical minerals like lithium and cobalt in them. And we're not going to have enough of that available over the next few years and decades to build the things we need. We're also working with shipping companies and schools, energy utilities, and really just making sure that that progress is smooth and that people are working together.
What are you most excited about right now with respect to smoothing out those possible road bumps?
Over the last year, we've seen the first real big action by the US federal government. We've got 3 bills, bipartisan infrastructure bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the CHIPS bill that are putting more than $1 trillion into the system to build clean energy. And it's done in a way that's going to help people across the country. So it's tax credits, it's grant funding, it's research and development. But then we're also seeing Congress act on permitting reform. And that was something that I think a lot of people wouldn't have expected. But what's really great is we're seeing local governments working with companies to build things in communities that they need. So we work with a lot of mayors across the US and around the world who are really focused on clean energy and building resilience for the people that live in those cities.
Is there an example you can share of a community doing that?
Yeah, so in Miami-Dade County in Florida, all the mayors there are working on building resilient roads, sidewalks, beaches, making sure that they're planting dune grass to keep the sand there when there's hurricanes. But they're also raising up the sidewalks. They're putting big pumps underneath of parks in the city that will pump out rainwater more quickly into the bay. And so they don't see that accumulation of flooding. And so they've invested this money in all of these resilience activities, and that can be shared with cities all around the world because they're trying it out there, seeing what works, what doesn't work, and that way the next city and the city after that can learn from them.
Mm-hmm. And can you say a little more about permitting reform and where we are in this country with respect to the changes that you're thinking of? And maybe if you could just start by saying, what are a few of those changes that are critical?
Yeah, so on permitting reform, there's a tension there. We need to build clean energy, especially transmission, to get electricity from wind power, solar power, where it's produced in the middle of the country or the Southwest, to the places that are using the electricity. But we also have to work with communities and make sure that we're engaging with communities early on in the process, from the very beginning, so that they're involved in the decision of whether it's building a wind farm in their town or building a transmission line across someone's property. Because the thing that we always talk about is we move at the speed of trust, and we have to build that trust over time. It's not a transactional thing. Companies and government officials have to work with community leaders to make sure that there's buy-in, that there's benefits, that the community sees those benefits, like jobs, like cleaner energy, cleaner air, cleaner water, to understand why this project should happen in their city or town.
Young people are and will continue to be on the front lines of climate action. Through the Aspen Futures Initiative, your team has the unique opportunity to develop and connect young people intent on moving the needle forward on climate solutions. Tell me more about the initiative and what young leaders are doing right now to implement climate solutions.
Yes, of course. And so just building on what Greg was just talking about with our program, in which we bring in people, thought leaders from all over, our Future Leaders Climate Initiative is focused on bringing young leaders from around the U.S. as well as the globe. And we created the initiative with the intention and desire of creating a space for young leaders to be empowered, to be equipped. And one of the ways that we're doing that is through our annual Future Leaders Climate Summit, which takes place every year, or at least for the last 2 years, in Miami Beach alongside the Aspen Ideas Climate. And with the summit, they have had the opportunity to focus on policy and innovative solutions, communication and impact storytelling, also thinking about workforce development and how do we bridge that gap as we're thinking about green jobs, and how we can make sure that young leaders have the tools and the skills that they need in order to have access to these jobs. And they've also been able to do some leadership development, which is key to anything when we're thinking about climate change and the movement around climate change.
What challenges do young people face in making their climate action dreams a reality?
I think the biggest thing that we have seen and heard from our young leaders has to do with connection and being in spaces where the conversations are happening, which is why we created the summit. It gives young leaders access to the spaces that they wouldn't have access to outside of the summit. We have thought leaders, experts that come to Aspen Ideas Climate. They have the opportunity to meet with them. So many of our young leaders since the summit, it's only been 3 months, but they've shared stories about how they've connected with a professor and they're working on research at various universities. Several of them have won awards, incubators, fellowships through their opportunity at being at the summit through Aspen Ideas Climate. So I think the biggest thing is really just being in the space to be able to be connected with what's going on and to have a voice in the conversation on the issues that are actually impacting them.
And we, during the Future Leaders Climate Summit, we were able to introduce 10 of those future leaders to Vice President Kamala Harris, and they were able to talk to her about some of the things that they're working on and some of the topics that they're concerned about, including climate anxiety. And so she later invited those 10 future leaders to the vice president's residence for Earth Day. And so seeing, going from coming into that program as, a young leader trying to figure out what their role in the climate movement is, to being invited by the vice president of the United States to participate in an event is, it gives them a lot of credibility, and it opens up even more doors for them to make more of an impact.
What can more experienced people do to help younger people in the climate movement and act on the clean energy transition?
I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier about making sure that they have a seat at the table. So making sure that when you are coming up with decisions, when you are having conversations, that you are inviting the young leaders in your spaces, in your networks, that you're finding them, that you're identifying those young leaders wherever you might be, whether it's, you're a company, you have a board, making sure that there is, a space, a seat or two for young leaders to be a part of the board, to be a part of those conversations, because really it's all about collaboration, making sure that their voices are heard and that they're able to make an impact in that regard.
Two other things that we can do to make sure we're including young leaders as part of the conversation. One is mentorship. You know, all the more experienced leaders have been through a lot of things in their career. Climate change has gone from, you know, towards the beginning of my career, kind of a very niche issue that was for environmentalists, to something that is a, you know, a top 2 or 3 issue to a lot of people across the country and around the world. And so helping young leaders figure out their space through experiences, I think, is really important. And then the other one is recognizing that every job is a climate job. And so whether someone actually goes to work for a climate organization, or they go work for an investment firm, or they go work for a media outlet, those all are connected to climate change, because everything we do, you know, right now there's a heat wave in Texas. Everybody is impacted by that. And so everybody, you know, in the world is partially responsible for working towards this. And so that's something I think we need to really embed in young leaders, is that whether you go work, you know, in climate change very explicitly or not, every job is a climate job.
It feels to me like it can be intimidating for young people who don't have the breadth of decades of experience coming to the table. What do you say to them to help give them that confidence that they have something valuable to bring?
What I generally have said to our young leaders is, because you are a young person, people actually want to hear from you, because they know that the work that you are doing has meaning and has value, and you shouldn't necessarily think about your age, or that you're a young person, or this person is older and they've been doing this for a very long time, but think about the fact that you're bringing a fresh perspective and a fresh eye in the way how, you know, some of these challenges that we've been tackling for a very long time, your voice is needed at this table and part of this conversation. So those are some of the things that I've been saying to our young leaders when they ask, you know, when they're intimidated or asking like, man, I don't think I'm good enough, or whatever it might be.
And I think, you know, I always advise people, you know, get in there. It's okay to make mistakes and then learn from your mistakes. We've all done it, and most of the valuable lessons that we all have learned are when we mess something up, and then take that and do it differently going forward. And so, and policy is a very messy process. It's not what's in textbooks at all. And as young people learn that process and learn how to navigate that, they get better and better at it over time.
When it comes to climate change, are we talking about solutions enough? What gives you a sense of active and applied hope?
I think our future leaders gives me a sense of hope when I think about all of the projects and initiatives that they're working on, how they, with or without the support of other people, how they are advancing the needle forward and charging ahead on different and tackling different issues within their communities, and thinking about solutions on their own, and whether it's they're raising their own funds for their own incubators, starting their own companies and organizations, connecting with each other. That really inspires me and gives me hope when it comes to solutions around climate change, that we do have a generation that's going to get the job done.
For me, it's, you know, climate change has long been an issue, but it's finally in the everyday vocabulary of people across the country. You know, for the 90s and to the 2000s, it was about climate science and whether, you know, is climate change real or humans causing it. Then governments got together in Paris in 2015. And it's only now that companies are building the technologies, they're buying the technologies, they're, you know, changing the way they operate, changing the way they ship things, the way they interact with people. And we're starting to see a really rapid increase in that. You know, every company has some sort of climate plan or sustainability plan, and that wasn't the case even 3-4 years ago. And so we're rapidly moving up that curve towards changing the way everybody's thinking about emissions and decarbonization and resilience, for, you know, very quickly.
Well, thank you both so much, Greg, Nikki. It's been such a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you, Alison.
Thank you.